Recognition, power, and influence is your birthright, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 249. In today's episode, I am giving you the alternative to the all or nothing mentality that comes up when we're thinking about our professional development, meaning we either need a job or we don't need a job. And when we don't need a job, we do nothing. When we need a job, we feel desperate, stressed, clingy, urgent, scared, all of these negative emotions that don't really help us find the role that we're truly looking for, that seat at the table, the voice at the table. And when we can break through that all or nothing mentality, then so many new opportunities, so many new ways of thinking about our career suddenly become possible. All right, let's get started. Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms. Hello, corporate badasses. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and super excited, as always, to be here with you again this week. So I have been receiving a lot of influx of emails and women looking for support to find their next role, whether they were laid off of their company that they had been working at for 20 plus years, or they are just feeling like really burned out and they finally want to do something about it and move into the next role. And there is this trend that has been happening in all of these messages that I wanted to address in today's episode and offer a different way of looking at things. So this trend that has been happening is people will say to me, because I'm recording this episode at the beginning of October, that they took the summer off. They took a couple of months off over the summer to recover. And then now that it's fall, they're looking to dive headfirst into their job search. And I think on the surface, that sounds like a perfectly valid plan. Sounds like a great idea. Maybe if you were talking to your girlfriend, you would advise her to do the same. You would say something like, oh, yeah, you've worked so hard. You've been at that company for 20 plus years. You've given it your all. You deserve a break. Take the summer off and then come back in the fall and, hit it hard. When I hear that advice, it makes me cringe. I say, oh, God, no, please don't do that. And it's not out of desperation, as in you have to spend the entire summer freaking out, applying for jobs, having a ton of anxiety, worrying about what's next, not being able to take time for yourself. But it's actually because it speaks to the overall mentality that got you into this perhaps quote unquote stressful situation to begin with. Why you would even need to take 2 months to recover after working at the same company for 20 years. Now, I want to caveat this. If you're listening to this episode and you're like, oh, please, Stacy, I did nothing wrong. That's totally fine. I'm not saying that vacations aren't great and you shouldn't take them and you shouldn't take time for yourself. But I'm going to offer you a very, very different perspective, and one that I have that seems to work quite well for all of my clients. And that is this concept of always be interviewing. Now, a lot of people think that always be interviewing is when you have a job, right? So, of course, you should always be interviewing when you're laid off and you don't have a job. But when you have a job, you should always be interviewing. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. I don't mean actually interviewing. I mean networking, having conversations, seeing what's possible, making sure that you're keeping your options open, keeping your head up, learning to articulate what you're looking for in your next role. This can happen even if you're 1 month in to your new role. Now, think about what that does to your brain when you think about that idea. So you finally get a job, you love your job, you love your boss, and now I'm telling you, as soon as you start your new job, you should always be interviewing. That seems very counterintuitive. You're like, no, I'm going to stay here for a couple of years. I'm not looking for anything else. And then When that time ends, then I'll start looking for a job. I am talking about changing the entire way that you approach work and your professional development. These are not two separate things that happen in your life. You have figured this out as a parent, if you are a parent, that you can't compartmentalize, that your children infiltrate your work and your work infiltrates how you treat your children and vice versa. So if you're going to think that I'm going to go to work and be very stressed out and then I'm going to be a calm, cool cucumber with my kids, it doesn't actually work out that way. Everything crosses over. The same is true for your job and your job search. So I recommend that you're always thinking about your professional development. You're always inquiring for yourself, working with a coach, in groups, talking to mentors, building allies. These are things that we do year round. This is the person that you become. You're no longer the person that is fight or flight. Like either I have to find a job right now, I'm so desperate and I'm scared, or I just forget about it. I can't even think about it because it's way too stressful. And so the person who needs to compartmentalize is the same person who feels like they have to take the entire summer off, not look for a job in order to relax. But I want to advocate for a new lifestyle, which is how do we look for a job? How do we look for the next opportunity in a relaxed way? This is 100% possible, and it also yields a much better result. So when we stop looking at our life and our career as either I'm working or I'm relaxing, either I'm working or I'm relaxing. I put in all this work for 20 years at this company and look what it got me. So now I'm just going to relax for 3 months because I deserve it. Instead of thinking, I put in 20 years of hard work, sweat, and tears at this company and look what it got me, meaning it would have been a really great idea to start thinking about my professional development earlier so that I could have anticipated, because even if we've worked at a company for 20 years, they're not indebted to us. The only thing that it means is that you get a better severance. Woohoo! Great. Good for you. But it doesn't actually mean that they're going to keep you on when they do layoffs. Of course not. I have clients that are dealing with like their entire group got let go. It doesn't matter who's been there longer or shorter. Everybody got let go. And so there's no hierarchy. There's no tax that we paid that has us stay at our company. They're not indebted to us. And I think we know that. But what we don't want to deal with is finding a new job. We're so stressed out about it that we decide to kind of put it on the back burner and I'll deal with it later. So then let's say you do take the entire summer off and then you go back into your job search, but you're looking at it as sort of an either or. So now you go into your job search full time, basically. So, everybody else is back to work. Your kids are back at school. Your partner is at work as well. So you're sitting at home and you're approaching your job search as a full-time job. That is incredibly stressful and also unnecessary. You don't need to look for job opportunities 40, 60 hours a week. And you kind of know that. So basically you spend 20 of those hours just worrying, kind of scrolling social media, not being very effective in your strategy, maybe reading articles about a company, but that's not really helpful in terms of getting into the interview process. And then you feel frustrated because you just spent 40, 60 hours a week working on your job search and it's not producing the results that you wanted to fast enough. So shouldn't I have a job now? And oh my God, now we're looking at November, December, and the hiring market is going to go down before the end of the year. So I better hurry up. I better get this done. But let's go back in time and let's think, what if you approached your job search year round? Meaning, well, first of all, I would love to, if even before you got laid off, that you have opportunities, that you know what you want next, that you have, started to build those allies, your network is connected, your resume is updated. This should just all be done. And then over the summer, now you're having very light conversations with people. Maybe you're spending about 5 or 10 hours a week on your job search prospect because one, not as many people are hiring in June and July. So I think that's fine. But you're spending 5 to 10 hours a week on your job search. You're being incredibly strategic and very realistic. And then otherwise, you're doing something nice for yourself. Maybe you are going on vacation. Maybe you're taking 5-day weekends on a regular basis. And maybe you do take 1 or 2 weeks off and you just go away with your family. All of that is fine as long as you don't have this either or mentality. I'm going to hit it when I get back and I'm going to hit it hard. Because when you do that, what you're doing is you're bringing stress into the interview process. I have so many clients that I coach through this immediately. So they have already been building allies. They already have their resume updated. And so then they find out that they're going to leave their organization. Maybe it's on their own terms, or maybe they're being laid off. And they're like, oh my God, Stacy, this crazy thing happened. I got reached out to by this company and it seems like a really great opportunity. I wasn't expecting it. I don't actually want a job. My severance goes for another 6 months. So I was sort of thinking that I would take the next 6 months to just very easily look at this process and see what happens. But I told him yes, that I would meet with him. And so then you go into that interview with this sort of laid back philosophy. You have this generic conversation, just like two-way conversation. I say generic meaning it doesn't need to create a job for you because the stakes are low. You're like, oh, I just want to hear what they have to say. But you're a very smart, talented woman, and you end up engaging in very thoughtful conversation. You're like, wow, that was really easy. In fact, Stacy, that was the easiest interview I've ever been on. And he wants to see me again. And this is a really funny thing, and this actually happened. A woman told me, she said, he didn't even ask me for my resume and he forgot. And so then he said, oh my God, I forgot. He sent her an email afterwards and he said, I forgot to even get your resume. Can you send that to me? You see what happened there? He's hiring. He reached out to her, but then she approached it with such finesse and such badassery that they just engaged in a conversation as two partners, as two executive leaders that have something to offer each other. And so then it led to not only another interview, but an even better interview because he's not so worried about her credentials. He just realizes, oh my God, I have to submit that to HR if I'm actually going to interview you. That is a better way of thinking about it. And then I remember telling her at the time, I said, be ready for this to happen fast. And the reason that that advice is so important is because if you're so closed off to not getting a job yet because you want to spend the entire summer relaxing, the first thing that would happen is you probably wouldn't have even done the conversation to begin with. You would have ignored the recruiter's messages or ignored the executive leader's outreach or DMs on LinkedIn in the first place. Or you would have said, hey, I'll get back to you in the fall when I'm actually continuing my job search. Well, at that point, it's too little too late. They've already explored some opportunities. Now you're like, oh, well, I'll reach out to them. But, you know, it's the timing has passed. The portal, as I call it, like the gate that opened up is already gone. The door closed for you. And so you want to see those openings and you want to walk through the door in a casual, cool way, not in a stressed out, desperate way. This is the crux of always be interviewing, is that we're showing up with nothing to lose in these conversations. It's forcing us to be maybe a little bit bolder than we would be if we desperately needed a job. It's forcing us to show up as a partner with the other person instead of trying to prove ourselves in the interviews. And we're really kind of getting to, I'm interviewing them mentality, which means like I want to ask them questions about this company. I want to decide if this is worth me leaving my job, worth me leaving, you know, the summer behind and starting earlier than I expected. Now, the good news is, and this is how it worked out with this client and also multiple clients, is that when you are available now, and I call now is incredibly vague. So you can say, hey, I'm ready to work now. And I'm open for my next opportunity now. You could still be in a job, which means that you aren't actually literally available now. You could be planning several trips coming up, which means that you're not literally available now. And you can still take the job and then negotiate a start date anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks in the future. Especially in leadership roles, they will wait for you, or at least you can propose it and they'll tell you why or why not that doesn't work for them. And so when you open yourself up to this possibility of it happening fast, then you might actually find a job in a very easeful, non-stressful way. I talked to a friend of mine who was laid off, and then it took him 6 months for his job search. And he said, man, if I would have known that it was going to take me 6 months to find another job, I would have relaxed a little bit more along the way. And I was like, well, yeah. And then not only that, but he had to take a step back so he spent 6 months being incredibly stressed, trying really hard to find a job in that sort of traditional way, like I need a job, I need a job, I need a job. And then he wasn't able to do it. So then at the end of the 6 months, he pivoted and just took a job that was not even a lateral move. It was a step down and a step backwards. And he's very frustrated. But at that point, he felt like he needed the money. But what if he could have known, and I really want you to think about this. What if it's going to take 6 months to find a job, or it's going to take 2 weeks to find a job, meaning that it can happen super fast, or it can happen really slow. Now, I don't know about your financial situation, and that could be totally different. Like you might actually need a job right now to pay the bills, and that's perfectly fine. And go get that job to pay the bills. I have a lot of clients that will take contract work, but they're still looking for their next leadership role, but they need to take contract work because they need a short-term solution. That's fine. That's just a job. Go get a job, pay your bills. But it still works out that you can have these situations happen super fast. And I find them to happen very, very quickly if you are very open to it and you don't feel like, oh, I'll look for a job later. And instead you're like, oh, I'm open to a job opportunity now or later. And when you go into it with that mentality, you might actually find a position very, very quickly. Now, if you go into it with the long-term mentality, like this could take me 6 months to find a job, then you also start to chill out a little bit more. You're like, well, I'm not going to kill myself working 40 to 60-hour weeks for 6 months. So therefore, how are you going to organize your time so that you can sustain that? And it's the same job search process that I would recommend for everybody, which is that we are going to leverage our connections. We'll update our assets on the front end. We have our story banks. We understand what are the 2 sentences that we need to say to really hook them in the first 7 seconds of the interview. This is all of the coursework that I teach inside of my programs and my one-on-one coaching. This is the foundation, and you can do all of that in the first couple of weeks of your job search. And my clients have done that a year ago or 2 years ago. So they have all of that information, all of their assets ready to go. And then the actual work of the job search process ends up becoming investigation, curiosity. If you're applying for jobs online, you're looking at them less as like, oh, this is my dream job, or I'm going to apply for this job, or I'm not going to apply for that job. Instead, it's more about, is this something that is piquing my interest and why? Can I use some of the talking points from this job description in my job search? Do I need to update my resume in general, not just to get this job, but because this is really aligned with my long-term career vision? And when you can start to look at your job search as a playful experiment, then you're able to have a more effective job search, but you're also teaching yourself how to be in the role afterwards. Because I don't want to get you into that same position where you just stay at a company and you grind it out only to be let go at the end of the day. That is not a useful use of your time. I want you to have that real impact and influence at your company, but you also have nothing to prove to them. You're not indebted to them, and you understand your own value and your own worth, and you'll go find a job someplace else if you need to. You're available. You have those connections. You're constantly building them, and those connections support your actual role itself. Like, you have people that you can talk to about some of the challenges that you're facing at work too. So you have that support system year round. That's ultimately always be interviewing. I never feel that level of desperation, need, clinginess, confusion. What do I need to do next to prove myself? Same with once you get into that role. You have to find a way to maintain that balance so that you're not at those higher levels of stress all the time. And the process to get there is exactly the same. Now, I want to address something that is a really interesting phenomenon that happens with my clients, and it's called boredom. So when I tell my clients that it could happen fast or it could happen slow, then what happens is they kind of lean much more towards the slow aspect because it's easier that way. You're like, okay, I've got funds in reserve and I'm doing pretty well. I don't need a job until March, so I'm just going to chill, take my time. I'm going to think a little bit more about that slow part that Stacy talked about. So maybe you do take that vacation, maybe you come back, maybe you dabble a little bit on the job search. But the problem is that you are basically learning how to be unemployed. You're learning how to love your life as an unemployed citizen. And that could be great. Maybe that is what you decide. Maybe you're at a season in your life that you don't actually have to go back to work. But you're basically telling the universe and telling yourself that it's better to not work. Life is better when I'm not working. And, pretty much ask anyone who's retired if life is better when you're retired. And the answer is yes. Like, we know that it's nice when you can basically call the shots and do whatever you want. And if you decide to get back to this person, you can. If you decide not to. And we kind of go that other extreme into this boredom. And we forget that things could happen very quickly. And what I mean by that is you have to, while you're going slow and slow paced, you have to be willing to make the ask. You have to be willing to say, what's the timeline? You have to be willing to create urgency in your job search. You have to be willing to get back to that person right away. Don't take 2 weeks to talk to them. When that person emails you and direct messages you on LinkedIn, get back to them immediately. Say, yes, I'd love to meet with you on Tuesday. Figure it out. So even though you're willing to let things take their time, you also have that sense of urgency because those doors are only open for a very teeny tiny amount of time. And again, it doesn't have to be stressful urgency, but it's very directive. I jump when needed. And I also understand how to relax and enjoy my life. And when you can find that balance, even as an executive leader, that balance to say, hey, I can do hard things. I lean in. And I also know how to relax and take care of my life. You have created a beautiful career for yourself. You have created that ultimate coveted work-life balance. You understand what it takes to be in control, to be in the driver's seat. And that's what my message is in today's podcast. And that's what my wish and desire for you is to stop living a dualistic life that is either or. Either I'm very stressed out, pushing really hard, or I just have to completely check out and not think at all about work or my professional development. I want you to always be interviewing, to always be thinking about your development, to always have your assets in order. And if you're already past this and you don't have any of this stuff in order yet, and you don't feel anything that I'm talking about today, you feel very desperate, clingy, needy, scared, you desperately need a job fast, then let's get to work. Let's not waste another day worrying, being like, I wish I could just get my resume together. You know what, Stacy, I really need to update that LinkedIn profile. There are a couple of simple things that you can do to all of your assets today to really tip it over the edge. I have an incredible course that is about to come out that is called Interview Magic, where I talk to you about how to get all of those basics in order, how you can start to line yourself up in this always be interviewing way, how you can feel like, okay, I've got everything, all the basics in order. I know how to tell my stories. My resume is great. My LinkedIn profile is great. I know how to reply to a direct message. I mean, this is like a big deal. We don't know how to send thank you letters. We don't know how to interview. All of this is going to be covered in this lifetime access course. You're going to have direct access to this course forever so that you can continue to review these course trainings. And then we're going to have worksheets and toolkits that go along with it to lead you through this process. And then all you have to do is let go. Show up in the interview, make that connection, stay curious, be open to having a next opportunity happen fast or slow. Make sure that you're on my email list, stacymayer.com/email, so that you can find out about my upcoming workshops, courses, everything that I teach to really set you up, not just for your next job, but for that successful career that's going to last even beyond retirement. You are here to make a huge impact, not just at your organization, but on the world. And I'm so, so thankful to be able to help you get there. All right. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Before you go, I have a question for you. Do you know how close you are to your next promotion? Really? Not what your boss has told you, not what you even believe to be true, but have you actually taken the time to sit down, take an assessment, review the 5 categories that it takes to get promoted into senior executive leadership positions, and decided where you fall in each category and given yourself a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 of how close you are to getting your next promotion? Have you done this? Well, now's your chance. If that feels interesting to you and you're like, hey, I want to know exactly how close I might actually be, or how far away you might be, and what it's going to take to get you even closer, then I invite you to take my promotability quiz. This is a quiz that I put together with practical tips that actually tell you where you're lacking and where you're winning. What are the areas that you actually need to improve, and not necessarily what your boss is telling you all the time, so that you can take concrete steps towards landing that next promotion and changing the face of the leadership table. Go to yourpromotabilityscore.com to take your free assessment today.